Hey, welcome back to part 2 of building the Cobra replica. So once you've got the body off, as you can see, it's just in the background there, well protected for the forthcoming rain and snow. You then have to get your chassis perfectly level, and that's level left to right and front to back, really important for the suspension setup. So we've got a perfectly centered bubble here. Next thing I want to do is I've wiped out these troughs here where the body sits in, and I like to use these. You don't need to access them during the build really for anything, so I like to just use them for a bit of storage, and it helps me go through all the parts that I've received, make sure that I've got everything. So I'm just going to get on with that. Okay, so I've got some bits out, and I'm going to go and inventory it all now so I can see everything and read all the labels that they've kindly put on all the packages. The next thing is assembly, but really there's such a wide variety of bolts, US sizes and metric sizes, that you need to sort them all out. They're going to go through the build instructions, and they're going to call for certain bolts and nuts, etc. And you really want them laid out so you know exactly what you need to use, so you don't end up using the wrong ones and only find out later on in the build. So I've got my bag of body bolts here, which I won't need for a bit, and the rest of the bolt kit here. So I'm going to go through it, label everything, and set it all out on a bit of card or something, and I'll be able to easily grab whatever bolt is required. Okay, so that went pretty well. I've marked up and ticked off all of my bolts and washers with the supplied list. I think I'm just short 4 sort of M10 by 40mm bolts that have a 125 pitch thread for these bolts, which go and attach the diff nose into the chassis. Through these 4 bolts there, those holes there. So I think that's all I'm missing, so I'm just querying that, or whether I should be using something else, or they might be somewhere else in the kit. So that is pretty successful. I'm now going to look at stage 1 of the instructions. Okay, so the build starts here. First job is to put in the upper front right wishbone. Make sure the bolts slides nicely backwards and forwards. If you find that a bit of the powder coat has got inside, just a bit of gentle filing should see you right. That is a lot better. Just a little bit more. And by the time we've got some copper grease on there, we should be golden. And you can even just give the bolt a bit of a, because these have been in storage, so they've got a bit of dust and rubbish stuck on them. Okay, so liberal amount of coppery grease. I'm not really sure of the correct amount, but don't think you can have too much on these. Okay, so that's looking good. Right, so we are dropping it through here, and then we're going to put one washer on the front here. And just slide it through. And then we need to just drop in a couple of washers on this side. And that is through. And then throw on a nut. Now I just need to tidy up this thread slightly. It's got a bit of crap in it. Good stuff. Alright, so it tells us to do this up, not too tight, and leave it in a horizontal position. So we're just going to okay, that's not too tight and it's just held in a horizontal position. So that's all good. Next job is the lower wishbones. So, same deal. Now it tells us to put 3 washers in the front on this one. So do that. And you can get all these donor parts from AK, or source them yourself from Breaker's Yard, etc. And refurb them yourself. Save a little bit of money, but it is quite handy getting the full package from AK. So we have got a liberal amount of copperies on there. Right, so on this one we're dropping this through and we're going to be putting what did we say, two bolts on the front. And we just got to wedge one washer in here, and that just needs a little bit of persuasion. So, oh, that's pretty much in there. I just need to tease that in with a, I can't quite get my fingers in it, I don't think. Okay, so we're all good there. That just needed a little bit more persuasion and centering of the back washer here. So that's all on. I've now supported this lower wishbone with the trolley jack, and it's time to put on this hub here. So just slides up to both, and get the nuts. Now to do these up tight, you may have to use, to stop the ball joints from spinning, you might have to use either tap gently with a hammer as you're doing it up, or some sort of hand grips or something, just to keep it all squished together while you can do up these 2 nuts. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I've got my wishbone set up here with the stub axle. To stop the ball joint from spinning in the end, I just put a car jack in between the 2 wishbones, jacked it up, and that gave enough pressure to stop the bottom ball joint spinning so that I could do that up. And now the next thing is to check for your camber angle. So the instructions call you to install 2 6mm M6 bolts loaded with washers on the bottom one, which I'll show you a picture of now. And then you can use the gauge that you can print out, but in my experience, I think a printed gauge is probably not very accurate. So I prefer to use the level on my iPhone. So just make sure that's zeroed correctly on something perfectly flat, and then you can put it up against the bolts and the washers and check for a camber angle. I think it said between 5 and 8 or 6 and 8 degrees. So I'm just going to check that now. Okay, all good. So just to confirm, you need to make sure your top wishbone is completely level. So adjust that by adjusting the axle stands at the rear of your chassis. And then once that's done, make sure your stub axle is coming out exactly 90 degrees. Install these 6mm bolts. You might have to just tap out the threads slightly because there's some powder coat in there. So bolt on the top, no washers. Bolt at the bottom, put your M6 washers on. I just padded this out with a nut just to keep them all in line. And then simply put your phone or your level up against the washers, and let me show you. So you would put your phone up against this top bolt and the washers, and you would measure that angle. And it has to be between 6 and 8 degrees actually. And I'm getting 6.5, 6.7 degrees on mine. So pretty happy with that. I think that's accurate enough. So now on to the other side. Okay, so the left-hand side was pretty successful. I've got a level bubble here. I was initially getting a higher reading, so I just had to adjust my bottom washers. I've now got one on this side and two on that side on the bottom, and also on the top. I've moved two over to the front here and one at the back, and that's just changes the angle of this stub axle. So by putting my phone up against these two points here, I'm now getting a reading of 6.6. The other side was 6.5. So in my book, I am a-okay. So let's move on. Okay, so now onto the front hubs. I've opted for the refurbed units from AK. Now you need to check them all out. They come sealed with a dust cover on, and inside they drop the castle nut and pin here. I guess it's pretty handy. It keeps it all together. But make sure you fish out anything random inside. I also had a random 7/16 nylock in there. Anyway, you get the units, and you need to make sure they're all stacked up with grease inside. They have put a liberal amount inside, so I'm pretty happy with those. Just a dab more, perhaps on the inside here. Okay, so make sure the front bearing race is nicely seated there, and any excess grease put onto your stub axle. Lovely job. Plenty of grease around here. Okay, and with that, I'll put a touch more there. And with that, you slide them on. Wipe my hands. You then have to put on this large washer here, which is shaped so it can only go on one way. Nice and squarely. And then, once that's on, this does slide all the way back to the back here, but you do need to be nice and square with that, and then make sure the bearings are in square. And then with that, you put the nut on, and you put this castle cover on after. So let's just leave that to the side. Just give that a wipe off. And obviously with this split pin inserted, it can't undo itself, but I'm just going to clean the grease off the threads inside and outside. Okay, so that's all cleaned off. Now do refer to the instructions, but I think you're meant to be doing this nut up with your torque wrench for about 16 Newton meters. Then rotate the hub forward a touch, and then do it up until you get to about 26 or 27 Newton meters. Then back the nut off half a turn, and then just do it finger tight. So hopefully refer to the instructions to make sure you get all that right. I'm just going to go and fish out my my torque wrench. Okay, so I've gone up to 16 Newton meters here. I'm just going to rotate the hub and then tighten this down to 27. I am going to refer back to the instructions though, and also I'm going to install the this castle here, but I'm not going to open up my split pin just yet. I'm going to put the wheels on later, obviously, and I'm just going to let it all settle, and then I'm going to revisit and make sure we've got these torqued on properly, because I think there'll be a fair bit of movement and settlement with the car going up and down on its wheels a few hundred times during the build. So I'm just going to put these through there for safekeeping, not open them up, and we'll revisit that later. And just to keep it all clean, You can just tap here, tap the dust covers on, and that is done. And remember, you can always get those dust covers off just by inserting a thin blade screwdriver in there and twisting. All right, onto the other side. Okay, so same deal here. Make sure you fish out any parts that might have been hidden inside this hub. I'm going to stick a load of more grease in here. Just like that. Grease on around here. Okay, I think that's pretty liberal enough. So, install it like this. It goes all the way onto the back. Which would be a lot easier if I didn't have grease all over me. Okay, that will compress when we put the nut on in a minute. So front ball race. Let's go for a bit more grease here. Yeah. Love it. Install that. Does need to be dead square. And then that should push on nicely. Okay, looking good. And then after I've wiped the grit and dust off of this, I'll put this on the front and do it all up again. Okay, so we've got a nice clean washer. I think we've got more than enough grease in here. So this only fits on one way. And separate these two bits. Okay, it's going to take me some time just to wipe the grease out of the thread on this nut, but basically I'll be installing that on the front. 16 Newton meters tight, and then rotate the hub forward, do it up to about 26, 27 I think it said, and then I'm not going to bend out the, is this called a cotter pin? I'm just going to insert it into place and wait until the car's been on all four wheels a couple of times, and then I'll jack it up and do the final tightening. So we're all good there. All right, let's move on. Okay, so unfortunately I haven't got my brake calipers and discs, so we're going to have to go slightly out of step with the instructions and install the lovely Nitron Shocks. So grab your 7/16 by 2.5 inch bolts and relevant nuts and a few washers on each one, and let's get to installing them. Okay, so these are dead easy. Liberal amounts of copper grease in all the bushings, etc., and on the bolts that you put through. And I'm even going to put a bit on the inside here. Why not? And inside the bushing here. Okay, so now we can fit them in. There we go. Okay, so a bit more grease around here. I'm going to clean off the threads once they've been poked through. That's one. Wash on the back side here. And fit number 2. Bit more grease can have too much. Okay, just insert this through here. Lovely. Another washer. And once I've cleaned up the threads, I'll just do them up nice and tight. Easiest thing you'll fit all day. Okay, onto the right hand side. It's worth noting you can't get front and rear mixed up. The front have this open bracket for the bottom fixing here, whereas the rears have this kind of fixing top and bottom. So on we go. I've already greased everything up. So just insert that like that. And drive that through. Okay, I'm just going to clean up the threads and do them up like the other side, and then we're done. Okay, on to the final job today for this front end. We're going to fit the steering rack. So you need some M10 by 70 bolts, which AK don't supply, and you need to install it up here into these holes, and you need to make sure that the thin pipes here do not foul and touch the body. So I can see that I have got a good 2 or 3 mil there, so I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and use washers and bolt all this in. And then once we've done that, we have to put on the ends and do some measuring. Okay, let's get it nearly there. We are all good there to carry on tightening. Make sure I've got some clearance there. Now that it is in tight position, yeah, I've got 2 or 3 mil. So I'm all good. I'll just do the final tighten there and then we'll get onto some measuring. Okay, so the steering rack's all installed. With the kit, you get some ball joint ends. You need to put these on and do 14 rotations on each side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then wind the lock nut up to meet it. And then when you've done 14 on the other side, you have to measure in between the two, and I need to double check the instructions. We're looking for something like 470 No, I'm going to have to double check. It's actually 47.5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead, put the locking nut on the other side, just here, take off the protective end, and then screw on the other ball joint 14 times, and then check the measurement between the very top end of a perpendicular ball joint all the way to the other one, and check for 47.5, and I'll get back to you in a sec. Okay, so I've measured 47.5 inches from the top of the ball joint to the top of the other ball joint, so we're all good there. So we're just going to bolt this up through here, stick a washer on, and do it the nut. Do it up nice and tight, same on the other side, and then we're done. Join me tomorrow for the diff. See you then.
Like a drug that